Presumption. I'm Sara with my friend Jim and my friend Matt.
Hey, just three friends having a chat.
Tres amigos. I was thinking Manny, Mo, and Jack, and I was like, well, it should be Jane, I guess. Anyway, we are back with another great episode. We have a great guest after the brief break, but we also have some great important announcements, I should say, which is that we've always said that our priorities, our practices, our clients, our law practices. And Jim has a couple of trials coming up. The holidays are coming up, and then we go into January. There's some other stuff there, but the programming will continue. But we do have a standing agreement, guys, right, that we go dark when one of us is in trial. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And especially with Thanksgiving coming up and, again, Jim being in trial for, I think you said maybe 3 weeks is the estimate. We just
Right now it looks like, starting November 27th for 3 weeks and then come out and we got Christmas and then have another trial starting up in mid to late January. But that doesn't mean we're not going to do programming. It's just there may be some gaps, right?
Yeah, exactly. We continue to be recording a ton of great content for you guys, but just wanted to let you know if you don't hear from us for a couple weeks, that's why. So
yeah, and the announcements will go up on our Instagram page and Twitter page, just alerting you that an episode is dropping, like we always do. But I just, I think we just didn't want anyone to think we're like MIA, disappeared on them. Anyway, and then I think talking about the holidays, I don't know. Do we have an episode dropping before Thanksgiving or?
This is it. You're about to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. So from my part, and I'll let you guys speak to it as well. I want to wish everybody a really happy and safe holiday. I also want to say that, look, holidays are not easy for everyone. Some of us don't have families. I don't have a family. My family's my sister, who doesn't live with me. And it can be tough because you're thinking about, people you've lost, people that you used to spend Thanksgiving with. And it's not a easy, pleasant time for everyone. But it's so important to keep close to those who are your family, your chosen family, your friends, do Friendsgivings or whatever it is. And after all, we are dedicated to mental health as well here. We haven't been doing a lot of that. We need to do that. But I just thought it's good to check in with our subscribers and say that, we see you, we hear you, and we get it. And I think wherever you are, just stay close to friends and, have a safe and healthy holiday.
Yeah, I'd like to add, Sara, that there's nothing more rewarding over the holidays than volunteering your time.
Yes.
At some, homeless shelter, a food bank, ringing the bell for, the Salvation Army. I mean, so that really is important. We've adopted a family, in our firm for Christmas. And, I would just encourage people to give back and think about the world around you. I mean, it is tough. And those of you who do experience severe depression, I've lost a friend over the holidays to suicide. And so, I don't want to get dark on this show, but, reach out. And if you're feeling desperate, there's a great suicide hotline that there are people there that can answer and talk to you, but reach out to a friend. Don't.
Jim, you guys are lucky because usually I do this drive, GoFundMe, which you're familiar with, to raise money for every Thanksgiving morning, because I live about 10 minutes away from Skid Row, which a lot of people know, even if you don't live in LA. And so every Thanksgiving morning, no matter what I'm doing in the afternoon or evening, I go to Skid Row and I set up a table and I give away stuff. I learned that they don't want hot food because they get a lot of hot food and it goes bad. So we take snacks. I take socks. Socks are like a big item. Costco is, where I go this time of year. And I usually do this GoFundMe so everyone can pitch in and I can just get more stuff. I didn't do it this year. I didn't move on it quickly enough. Otherwise I'd be hitting you guys up. But that's what I do. And giving, Jim nailed it, giving is just it's so cathartic. It really takes you out of yourself, and it creates a sense of community and oneness, and that takes away from aloneness.
Wow. Well, that was beautifully said by both of you guys. I don't think there's really any level of sincerity I can add to any of that. I'm so glad that you guys have this sense of altruism. It just comes through in everything that you guys do, whether you're working on cases pro bono or, in this case, setting up a table and giving out food to homeless people. I do not lead a life like that. For my part, I was just going to say more lightheartedly, hey, if you're going to a Friendsgiving, let's bring dishes that are actually themed to Thanksgiving food. Last year, I went to a Friendsgiving and somebody brought fish soup. That was our Thanksgiving entree. It was fish soup. And I know we're all supposed to be thankful on this day, but I'll tell you, I'm not doing fish soup again this year. So this is my message to the listeners. Bring real Thanksgiving food to your Friendsgiving.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Listen, it was so funny because last year I had COVID. I didn't know I had COVID. And I was packing these brown bags to take down there, like 500 of them. So I was putting the items in there, and my neighbor started helping me. And I had like little toothbrushes and toothpaste. Like one of the items was that. And he said, he was trying to like get it done quicker. And he goes, you're catering to a population that probably doesn't have teeth or dental hygiene. So you might want to throw this one item out. And I was like, no, I got this thing. They need to have it. But yeah, it's, you always have to think of what Thanksgiving, listen, Thanksgiving is about gratitude. And I don't think we have enough gratitude. Any of us, we all have so much to be grateful for, so many blessings. And it's just a time to really kind of connect and stop and be grateful. So anyway,
it is by far my favorite holiday, and nothing chaps me more when they start decorating for Christmas before Thanksgiving. Oh, yeah. And so I have a question for you, Matt. I'll go first. Favorite Thanksgiving dish. You mentioned fish soup, but my favorite dish is stuffing, but it's stuffing made with oysters, and it is really good. It's a Southern delicacy, but oyster stuffing is
Where
awesome.
Can we get that?
Wow.
Yeah, well, I'll send you the recipe. It's awesome.
No, we're not.
All right, Matt, what's your favorite?
I got to say, I'm a fan of the homemade cranberry sauce. I'm not really a gravy guy, which I know is verboten to a lot of people, but I always dip the ham or the turkey into the cranberry sauce. And there's one that my wife makes with a little bit of like an orange zest, a little bit of cinnamon to it, maybe a little on the frou-frou end. But that to me, that's the only time of year I'm ever going to eat that. So that's usually what I'm looking forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Sarah?
Pie, because I have a sweet tooth, but not any pie. I like good stuff. Usually I make it, so I bake really well. So I don't know what I'm doing this year. I think I'm doing cherry, not pumpkin, and I'm baking this weekend, and I'm sending a bunch of cookie boxes out to people, including Jim and other people down there in New York and my friends all over. I always do that. So cookies out and then pie for the table.
All right.
Love it. Well, speaking of being thankful, we should say thanks again to all of our fans for supporting us over the last, it's been like 6 months now we've been doing the show, I think. Amazing. And, if this is your first time listening, welcome. Please tell a friend. Please subscribe. Check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/@thepresumption, or you could subscribe on really any podcast network. We're also on social media @thepresumption. And let me tell you, we have a fantastic guest coming up for you guys, Jim Persinger, who he works in the world of cell phone tower analysis. And it sounds like, how exciting can that be? But he was absolutely one of the best guests we've ever had on the show, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think, but Jim Persinger coming up after.
He's the phone man, no doubt.
Yep. All right, we'll be right back after a quick break.
Welcome to the show, Jim Persinger. How are you?
I'm fantastic. And you?
I'm good. I've been in court, but I'm good. So Jim Persinger, for those of you who don't know him, you should know him, especially if you our criminal defense attorney. He is a cell data and forensic cell expert with extensive CAST and cell tower knowledge and experience, which is really what is of most interest to us today, given your very robust background. He's a retired law enforcement officer from Cobb County, Georgia. He's also a certified POST, stands for Police Office Standard Training instructor for law enforcement, as well as an instructor for private investigators. He has nearly 40 years of experience in technology and can program in 6 different programming languages. He's been an expert witness in a bevy of cases, including homicides, child pornography, intellectual property theft, hacking, intrusion cases, embezzlement matters, and also civil cases. Jim has been an expert in over 3,500 cases for both, these are criminal cases, for both prosecution and defense. And that work is involved either analyzing a hard drive, an SD card, third-party data, cell phone extracted data, or similar issues. He has also designed and developed a product called Pin and Essentials that works with the same data that CAST analyzes. He's had a number of cases where an FBI agent assigned to CAST, and CAST, for those of you who don't know, you hear that word a lot in recent high-profile cases, stands for Cellular Analysis Survey Team with the FBI. And so Jim has performed their analysis, essentially double checking their work, because we always have to do that. He's analyzed over 600 phones and developed special software drivers to obtain data from odd cell phones. And he's been the principal of PM Investigations for 22 years. PM is a Georgia and South Carolina licensed private investigation agency. So welcome, Jim. And the first thing I want to ask you, because I thought it was really clever, is what does PM stand for, PM Investigations?
So I learned very early on when I decided to form this agency that most disgruntled employees went home in the evening and did the dirty work, tried to get into the server, tried to get into somebody's email, was doing the spyware. And so I said, I'm spending an awful lot of time in the evening. I think I'll call my company PM Investigations. So that's how it got together.
Okay, so I thought it was because the alleged crimes were occurring in the PM hours, but same thing.
Yeah, that activity was just so robust in the evening.
Yeah.
And
Right.
It really kind of proved itself even more so with COVID, because people were at home and they were upset because they weren't getting paychecks, and so kept them very busy.
Yeah. So the first question from me before I turn it over to Jim is cell towers. It comes up in our cases all the time now, but they can, but not always do, place people within the range of coverage that a given cell tower, essentially covers in a given area. So the first question is really general. I want you to explain to our listeners and viewers how cell towers work in a perfect world, and what records and information as defense attorneys would we want to see and review if we're dealing with cell tower data, placing our clients near a specific crime scene. I'm sure Matt will need this information too.
Yeah, and that's a great question to always start with, because, we drive down the interstate and we see these huge towers that are just, way up in the air, and we're wondering, what exactly is that thing doing? And I think it's important to kind of know that it's made up of different components to begin with, because that metal structure that we see, that is not the cell tower. That is just what's holding the guts that's at the very top of it. That antenna is what's sending out the signal to the phone, and then the phone sending the signal back to that antenna is what is getting kind of locked in at that particular phone call. So, the tower's job, it was not designed to be a tracking device. It was more for billing purposes. And so what it had to do is it had to say, okay, well, I've got this person, he's making a phone call, and now it's trying to regulate it. It's trying to determine, is it a good signal? Is it something that may actually drop or whatever? So that tower itself, at the very top of it, is what's key and important. And then, trying to determine its range. And the range can be so many different variables. It can be based on, what the horizon has, if it has a building in the way, if it's older technology, if it's been struck by lightning or whatever the case may be. But that particular tower's job is to try to keep you connected. And then as kind of a second thought to that, it will determine, hey, I'm about to lose this this individual. So what does it try to do? It tries to find you another tower. It tries to snap you over to somewhere else to keep that call going.
Hmm. Well, when you say billing purposes, what do you mean? I mean, if I'm in an area, obviously I want to make sure I have good coverage. I'm connecting to a cell tower. But for billing purposes, I mean, we're all getting like sort of monthly plans or what, how does it play into billing?
Yeah, remember that way back in the time, it was a charge per minute.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
This flat rate. And, now they're trying to do different things with the towers, but it was always based on that per minute scale. The longer you stay connected, the more money they make.
Right. So essentially, we need these cell towers to stay connected. Yeah. We rely on them for connectivity. Would be accurate to say?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Now, I want to ask a question. Sarah mentioned I might be interested in this as well. To be clear, it's not because I commit crimes and need to know about my cell phone locations. One of my side gigs is writing true crime stories. And so a lot of the cases I've written about, they deal with these cell phone towers. And I'm really interested to hear a little bit more what you were just describing, how when you go into a certain area, if that tower goes down, it'll snap you to another tower. How often does that happen? And how often is that, part for Sarah and Jim? How often is something like that involved in these cases that you're doing?
It's a really tough question, because the first and foremost that you should get when you get those cell tower records is the service and maintenance records of that tower. Because you need to know if that tower has suffered some kind of internal technological issue where it's not performing like it should. And when that happens, the tower's job, it may be divided in what we call sectors. So you have an alpha, beta, and a gamma. Those, just think of a pie. You got 3 pieces of that pie. And what it's trying to do is keep you satisfied, keep you connected. And if that tower is weak, it is going to say, well, you know what, maybe I ought to put him over at this other tower because it's not as congested or because it has the better technology. And that's critical because, again, what cell phone providers don't want to have happen is that you get dropped. You get dropped, you're going to another provider.
Right. And that what Matt just described, I think Jim and I are going to get into, but triangulation is a thing where in one of my cases, I mean, my client got acquitted because they couldn't place him properly within the range of the crime scene. He was almost 20 miles away.
Yeah. When you think of triangulation, you think of a triangle. It's exactly what a triangle made of 3 points. You got 3 towers. The best thing that you can do in a situation is be able to put that person on the inside of that tower's triangle between those 3 different towers. And now you've got a little bit more to work from because now you can actually say he's within this area. You see, there's a misnomer out there that towers want to talk to the closest tower. That's not necessarily true, because just because it's closest doesn't mean it doesn't have an overabundance number of users and it can't handle the load. So it's going to shift you to somewhere else, again, snapping you over. It's very important to try to get as many towers that are talking to that one phone to kind of corner him in, corral that phone into that triangle so you know exactly where he's at.
Got it.
And Jim, I think it's pretty obvious from what we're talking about, but these towers record, gosh, I don't know, millions of phone connections a month or a week. I mean, and how's that data? I mean, how does someone like you get the data to say Jim Griffin's phone hit the tower at sector gamma at 3 p.m. on a Friday afternoon? I mean, how's that data available?
Yeah. Okay. So by way of subpoena, you got to send it to the provider. The provider is acting like a big sponge. It's taking that data, cultivating it so that it is in some sort of format. Like you take AT&T, for example, and they're going to give you a PDF and they're going to give you a text file. And the text file itself can be broken up so that you can see not only the tower identification number, the phone number, the duration of the phone call, but the latitude and longitude of where the base of that tower is. Not its mailing address, but its actual location, physical location. So you could go out there with a mapping software tool and actually stand at the base of it, and that's where it's going to say that you're at.
Right. And we've had experience with, you can get phone numbers from the cell phone carrier or the tower owner. I mean, tower owner doesn't necessarily mean it's Verizon or what have you. Some of these private companies own these towers, but you get numbers, and it's another task to try to unmask the number to find out whose phone that is. Isn't that right?
Oh, absolutely. 'Cause, they're not going to put a name with it. The best way to really get a name in a case is analyze the client's phone, because if that phone number was important to the client, he's probably got it stored in his contacts. So now you can do that cross review of the phone number that you get from, say, AT&T, and see what it shows in the phone's contact that says who the person is. Because we all know, cell phones today, our phone numbers, we can port them out. We can, if I'm tired of AT&T, I want to go to Verizon, I want to go to T-Mobile or whatever, I can take the phone number with me. Well, that can happen 2 days after an incident.
Well, wait a second, Jim P. When you subpoena, like what Jimmy G asked you, when you subpoena the records on the cell tower, right? You find out the cell tower belongs to Verizon. You subpoena those records, and you're looking at a specific date and time, a window of time, and you look at what does that give you? That gives you the phone numbers that connected to that tower.
Yeah.
During it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry.
And then you have to subpoena those numbers for the ownership of essentially the identity of the person those numbers were assigned to, right? Am I correct?
Yes, unless you can get it from the contact list of the device. So if my client hands me his phone and I extract all the phone numbers and contacts, I can match it up that way.
Got it. So I think, Jim, you were going to ask about the factors that Jimmy G. You were going to ask about the factors that could interfere. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you mentioned maintenance records, and I guess how do you determine that the cell tower is functioning properly and giving proper readings on sectors and what have you, and then what factors go into when you analyze cell phone data to ensure its reliability? I mean, what are you looking for to make sure that the information is accurate?
Well, it's just that, because the maintenance records are going to say this tower was updated or upgraded, or that there was some kind of enhancement done, or that it was taken offline. And so if that's going to be the case, I'm just going to raise that flag and say, we've got a tower here that was under some kind of maintenance issue. And then we can't trust its reliability anymore. It's sort of like if you go to a mechanic and have your tires changed out and you don't put the lug nuts on and the tires fall off. Where do you go back? You go back to the mechanic and say, did you tighten the lug nuts? When you're talking about the tower, if it shows it had some kind of technical issue, you need to address that and say this tower can't be relied upon because the maintenance record says it was having issues.
Right.
So I guess, okay, but what are the factors that can impact the functionality of a cell tower? Like, is it weather? Is it, lack of maintenance? And what could mess it up, in other words?
Lightning can certainly do it, even though they ground it. Lightning's knocking down trees. So I don't know that a cable is necessarily going to stop that tower from getting hit from lightning.
Right.
But just its own, what we call firmware. So, in technology, right, there's firmware, there's software. Firmware usually deals with the hardware itself. And then you got software that, is what we see kind of more or less on our phones, of the apps and that sort of stuff. If that firmware developed an issue, let's say that it did get overcrowded, and that caused that tower to do some kind of weird reboot system. Well, if it rebooted at the time that the client was using it, what happened to his signal? It probably got dropped. But did the AT&T service on the back end, did it detect that? And what did it do about that? Did it just store it and say it's okay?
Well, what about temperature? I mean, the Kohberger case, for example, was a snowy, cold, night when these the quadruple homicides occurred. Like, does temperature impact the accuracy? And how far back does a defendant need to go to look at, these records?
Well, to answer your first question about temperature, we know that, technology has a nickname of Murphy being involved. When something goes wrong, it's Murphy's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Electronics likes it to be cool, but it doesn't want it to be cold. It wants to function, and it can't all the time when things are really cold. So you do have to take those into considerations. Now, when you're getting these records back and you're looking at it and you're taking that into consideration, I always tell my clients, go back 2 weeks before the incident. Let's see what that tower was doing. So that 14 days before, did it have some magical reboot? Did it have some other service going on with it? And then 2 weeks after the incident. Right. So I want to get that 1 month worth of data that I can now work with. I don't want to isolate it to just 1 or 2 days. That's not enough to give me a good baseline.
Good. Okay. So look, the Kohberger case, we're following that case, Jimmy G and I, because it is fascinating, and a lot of our listeners and viewers are just absolutely fascinated by it. There's a probable cause affidavit that I sent you, Jim P., that places Kohberger in the general area of the crime scene on Kings Road, on 12 prior occasions, okay, around that same time that the murders occurred. But on that night, the night of the murders or early morning hours, in the window of the murders, his phone did not connect. Now, people have taken this probable cause affidavit and started to say his phone was off. He turned his phone off. And it doesn't say that. It just simply says that the towers that serve that area did not connect to his cell phone. Okay, so looking at this might get a little in the weeds, but it is something that our viewers, I know, really have been wanting to know about. So looking at the probable cause affidavit, and my assistant, I think, just marked the portions that are relevant. Like on page 10, it says that, his last 4 digits, 8458, was an AT&T number, and that they matched up him as the subscriber to that number with also a white Elantra car that was caught on surveillance, essentially moving in the direction away from the crime scene towards his home in Washington State. Okay, so that's just like an added fact. And they got the search warrants to look at what cellular devices, this is on page 11, utilize cell towers in close proximity to the murder scene. And that on that day between 3 and 5 a.m., essentially they determined he was associated with the car and the phone, and they show the movement of the car, and they show that let me see what it says here. It says that they look for cellular devices that utilize those towers around the time of the murder. And however, they're saying his phone did not pick up signal on that occasion, even though it had on 12 other occasions around the same time. And then they're opining that individuals can either leave their cell phone at different locations before committing a crime or turn their phone off prior to going to a location to commit a crime. This is done by subjects in an effort to avoid alerting law enforcement that a cell device associated with them was in a particular area where a crime is committed. I've come across this, and it's a bad fact, but it's not as bad except for there's 12 other times that his phone did connect in that area. How do you plausibly, if you were working with Jimmy G and I on this case, and we have to go to a jury and explain why just on this night his phone didn't connect, like what would be some plausible explanations or even possibilities for the prosecution?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is a dead battery. I mean, how many times have we gotten to the point we've used our phone and then all of a sudden the call got disconnected and we're thinking, well, what happened there? My call got disconnected. You look down and your phone battery's dead. It doesn't just magically charge. Now,
but does the phone record, given that it records everything, when you charge it? Is there a place in the phone that tells you when you charge the phone, like a record of when you charge the phone?
Yeah, exactly. They do. Now, you have to consider phones are sponges. They are sucking in everything. And there are so many different, apps on there. There's so many different controls, so many databases, and so much of that it does keep up with, hey, he just connected the phone to a power source, and this is where I was at 13%, and I'm going to now start charging. So it does do that. Now, again, you can also have areas where, for whatever reason, even though you've been in that same path going, to back and forth to work and home, you can hit a dead spot. There can be still a dead spot that you didn't have yesterday, that it just, I don't know what happened. It just knocked me offline, because we've all experienced that with phones.
Now, Jim, I got to tell you, it's a mystery to me, but more often than I think, more than my fair share, my phone goes on airplane mode, and I didn't even know I put it on airplane mode. I mean, so you can fat thumb it like that, right? Somebody like me.
Absolutely.
Because he doesn't know how to use an iPhone. I mean, let's be real, he's new to it. So,
it's interesting because way back in the day, you look at an iPhone and to find where airplane mode wasn't easy to find. So why is it more readily available today? I'll tell you why. It's TSA. It's going through the airport. It's going to church. They don't want to hear the phone ringing. You're in a theater, so they made it more accessible. It's right there on the surface. And you're exactly right, Jim G, that you could put that thing in airplane mode and not even realize it.
I've done it a lot. It's amazing.
So what is it? Because you can swipe, and then on an iPhone you can swipe, and then all the buttons are there. You can easily swipe and hit, or something like that.
Well, yeah, and with an Android phone, they even have this setting that says "Don't remind me," so it automatically, you do the swipe, and it doesn't say, "Hey, are you really wanting to go in airplane mode?" It just puts you in airplane mode.
Yeah, I mean,
we got Jim off of off that terrible phone service and over to iPhone.
Oh my God,
he's living in the 21st century now.
I would refuse
it's a struggle.
to communicate on SMS because it goes green. I can't stand it. So I would ask Jim to text me on WhatsApp. So thank God. But I've had an iPhone for years, and I didn't know really about. I mean, I was like, why do I need airplane mode? But when you fly, you put your phone on airplane mode so you can connect through the Wi-Fi of the flight, the airline, and also, sometimes I'm doing media and I give the phone to a producer to take pictures or something, and I don't want my text messages coming in or my client's private stuff popping up on my phone. So I just put on airplane mode so they can use the camera. I mean, there's like non-nefarious, legitimate reasons to put your phone on airplane mode, but it also is a bad fact in your case if you can tell from a phone that your client put it on airplane mode before the time of a crime that he's accused of, instead of perhaps getting a burner phone or not having a phone at all. It's probably the best.
That goes back into what we call anti-forensics, when you're doing something out there in the technology arena to avoid being detected.
Right.
I
mean, it's just so hard. And that's why I asked you about the batteries, because anything you remove, turn on, turn off, put down the phone. I mean, that came up in Jim's case in Murdaugh, the movement and the steps and all this. I mean, everything is recorded. I think that, up until recently, I mean, I learned these things as just from my cases, as time goes by, I keep learning about new technology, new things. But, there was a time where it was just about what you put in the phone, what you keep in the phone, and now it's like, you don't even know what's in your phone, like every movement,
Now, let's go back to this example in Kohberger where, apparently we're assuming he's driving the white Elantra. We're assuming that he's got his phone with him and it's not hitting the cell phone tower. And, one plausible explanation is the battery's dead. Now, Sarah, you say, oh, well, the phone would show it. But no, we don't have his phone from that night or the next day. I mean, it was months later. And Jim, you tell us, I mean, if law enforcement ever got that actual phone, but, months later, I mean, there's a lot of data that's overwritten very quickly, right? And so
that does happen. Yes, you're exactly right.
Oh, okay.
Now, there's a process that us forensic technology people say, and it's called FIFO, first in, first out. The databases are designed to only really hold so much. And as soon as it starts to work its way down the channels and become overwritten, it's gone, the chance of recovery is very, very, very slim. Now, it may be fragmented, maybe all broke up into all these little jigsaw puzzle pieces, and you're trying to put it back together. And guess what's missing? The time that you need. It's not going to be there. So, yeah, that does happen. But I've had the reverse happen, too. I've analyzed a phone that was 6 months old, and it's still there.
So there's no like set rule, like, you know, if I come to you with two clients, one has an Android, one has a iPhone, and there's no set, like, you can't say to me, like, for example, you know, when you talk about social media platforms and subpoenas, you know, my the Jim P, not as good as you, that I work with, has told me, you know, for example, Snapchat holds the data on their server for X amount of time, TikTok for X amount of time. This one never goes away. Like, there's different sort of set parameters, but you're saying there's no telling when that data can be overwritten.
That's correct. And here's the thing to remember about your apps where they say it's 30 days, 90 days, 120 days, or whatever. It really depends on what version of the app you're using. When did Snapchat or WhatsApp or whatever, when did they change their policies? You know, we all know, like Facebook, right? They're constantly changing their terms of services. You never know what's there. It is truly a roll of the dice. You can send your subpoena, you can look at your phone, and it may not have anything there. I prep my attorneys to expect me to come back to you with nothing. Get that expectation of getting nothing so that maybe at the end of the day, I can surprise you.
Now we, you know, this is a good point. We do know that these third-party providers, you know, that you sign up for Snapchat, but they're collecting your data and they're holding your data offsite in their servers. But you know what we're talking about now is, you know, what is in that little computer in your phone and how long that lives, and that's a random guess.
It's a gamble.
Oh, yeah. It truly, you know, you stood a better chance with a computer. It had a bigger device in it of storage, and there was a much greater chance of recovery. But you're talking about even these iPhones, the 512 gigabytes. I just did one the other day where I had to image it. It took 9 hours to make a forensic image of that. Even though I have that much data, there's still a good chance it's not going to be there.
You know, Jim,
it's always go ahead, Jim.
You may have followed some of the Murdaugh case, may not, but, you know, I made a big deal in my closing argument. It was a big deal in the case that, you know, Maggie Murdaugh's phone was tossed to the side of the road about 1.5 miles down from the murder scene. And when it was recovered, the phone was recovered, the law enforcement did not put the phone in the Faraday bag. They left the location services going. They put it in airplane mode, but the location services were still on, and by the time they were able to got around to analyzing the phone, the location from that day had been overwritten, and and the only location data on the phone was the phones that SLED, and so, you know, we were deprived of that. And so, you know, that's sort of one example of where the data on the phone just gets written over. And tell us, you know, your experience, how to preserve forensically a cell phone at a crime scene, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, and what do you see the biggest mistakes law enforcement are making in that regard?
Well, you know, because cell phones are what we consider to be alive and breathing. They're active. They're on. If that's on, that phone is doing something, either on the background or on the foreground. Something is going on with it. So, you know, you do have to handle it different than a computer. With the cell phone, the first thing I want to do is put it not only in airplane mode, I want to turn off Wi-Fi, and I want to turn off Bluetooth, because those are the 3 deal killers right there. Once I take that precaution, I put it in a Faraday bag. Now, the idea behind a Faraday bag is that I don't care what kind of, you know, antenna waves that are coming to that phone, it's not going to get to, it's going to be blocked. And that way, when I go to make my image, I know it's as pure as when I picked it up. So you have to do that, turning off airplane mode, or turning it on airplane mode, actually, and then taking the Wi-Fi, taking it out, and then taking Bluetooth and turning it off, and then putting it in that Faraday bag. Law enforcement seems to pick it up, put it in airplane mode, and then walk to their lab with it.
Yeah, that's what happened in our case. Now, and anyone who followed that case learned, as we all did, there's an enormous amount of information stored in that little gadget in your hand. And can you sort of give our viewers and listeners a rundown of the type of data that your cell phone is collecting about you every day?
Yeah, your health apps. I mean, they're massive in there. They've even expanded in the latest iPhone the size that it can now store. And that health app is giving you walking distance. It's giving you what we consider to be the health of the phone, the health of the battery, the number of apps that are running, the number of apps that are in sleep mode, the versions of those apps, because the version of the apps by themselves play an important role. Because if you're analyzing, say you got a WhatsApp 7 and today it may be 15, well, the settings aren't going to be the same. The data collection may not be the same. So you have to almost become an encyclopedia of those apps to be able to determine what should I expect to find. So you got app data, you've got the health monitoring, you've got just the regular operating system that keeps that phone going, that keeps it running. What's version of the operating system that's on there? When was the last patch put on it? There's just a plethora of different things that you have to consider.
Can I jump in with a related question, which is you're saying that you have to be like an encyclopedia of all these different apps and updates. And I just wanted to ask you personally, how do you keep up with all of this constantly changing technology so that you can keep your clients informed? I feel like we were just talking about putting it into airplane mode on accident, but you need to really know every part of every app. How do you even get that information?
Well, because each case is individually focused on a particular app. Let's take text messaging. And let's say that you are using Snapchat. I want to see what the version is on the phone. Then where do I go for my best source? Right over to Snapchat. I want to see. Most of the time, those apps will have some kind of log as to what changed over the different versions. Now I can apply that knowledge to the database that I can find on that phone. That's a great start right there, because now I can say, it wasn't saving my auto log on before, but now it is. Or that I was deleting the message manually versus automatically. Those different settings are going to be found at the provider, the developing company.
So it's really kind of a case-by-case basis, and then you kind of work backwards from there.
Yeah, and it even make your head hurt more about that. You can take two iPhones, identical. They can both be iPhone 14s, Pro Maxes, 256 gigs, identical, bought at the same store, but there's something different about them, and that's the user. You see, every user uses their phone differently. Some will update their apps. Some will never update their apps. Some set it for automatically. As soon as I go in and I get Wi-Fi, it will automatically update. Those are the things you have to learn from the phone, and sometimes talking to the user to find out what he was doing.
Now, Jim, you do this daily, and we all have this picture in our mind of you getting the phone itself if you're hired by the defense, but that's really not what you're getting, right? You're getting the extraction. And can you explain that process?
Well, sometimes, Jim, I will ask, hey, let's go in front of the judge and let's see if I can get the phone and make my own image. Because for whatever reason, I don't like what law enforcement's provided me. You take one of the main applications out there that we probably all have heard about is that Celebrite, and they have the very expensive end, and then they have what they call the reader edition. And the reader is basically what the investigator at the law enforcement agency put in for the reader to analyze. So you may actually come up short if all you're doing is looking at the reader version of it, because that reader version is based on what the government's investigator felt was important to the case.
Right.
His
and
side.
you get and often you get thumbnails and you don't really even know what the thing is, what the item is or whatnot. One thing, Jim P, with respect, a couple points that you made with respect to this, getting the device itself, I've been able to get orders to get the actual phone for the same exact reason, to have my own expert do the analysis and the imaging. But almost always, I don't remember any time where it hasn't been the case. We have to agree that the government does its own imaging before that phone is given to us, and that we will not essentially contest the authenticity of, we will stipulate to the authenticity of that imaging. at trial, because once they give us the phone, it's no longer, it's the chain of custody issue, right? It's no longer with them. So you have to almost always agree to that. When you talk about the Faraday bag, how does that protect the data? Can you explain what that is and how it protects the data?
Yeah, it's got this for the easy discussion, it's got like a layer of aluminum foil, if you will, on the inside of this that prevents signal from entering the bag. So this mesh that actually is on the layers of the bag, once I put it in there, I can then roll the top of it several times and it seals it. So it keeps that phone from having any signal interruptions coming to it.
Got it. So following up on question that Jim asked you, part of your expert work, you also, maybe you didn't answer this in the greatest detail, so I'm sorry if it's redundant, but you evaluate how law enforcement has handled the cell phone to preserve the integrity of the data. What are some of the common mistakes that they make that essentially, we can cross-examine them on?
One of the great things is about time. They'll get mixed up over UTC versus Eastern Standard or Pacific or daylight savings, and that adjustment. If you're looking at the phone and you're inside the database, you have to know enough about those column headings that may actually say, this is in UTC time. I have seen before where they have built their entire case on a timeline with the wrong factors. And they were 4 hours off, 5 hours off, and they put their PowerPoint up on the screen, and all we do is ask questions about UTC and Eastern, and you can almost see the look on their face where they realize they've made that mistake.
Yeah. I hate UTC. It comes up on when I try to schedule things with Jim and Matt. Sometimes it comes up and I'm like, what the hell is that? It has like it says UTC and then it has like some weird location next to it or whatnot. Okay, so the time zone. What else?
So and the time zone is going to be your most important thing. But then the other thing that you want to be able to look at is the string of the characters. For example, let's say we're talking about a photograph. There's a mathematical calculation we call hashing. Well, it's not the stuff you smoke. It's a mathematical formula that actually will tell you if that picture matches the picture that's in the phone. That gives you kind of a digital fingerprint that what you're talking about, what you've seen in that photograph, as well as the picture itself. Now, that is different than metadata, because metadata is typically when the picture was created, what created it, if it was the phone or if it was passed on by a different kind of camera, the flash settings and everything else. So metadata, although it's important, hashing that information is more important, because that gives me the reason to believe that this picture is real. It can be matched up inside the phone.
So have you gotten photos where it doesn't match to the phone? I mean, does that happen?
All you have to do is change one of the pixels, just one of those little bitty dots that you can't really see with the naked eye. You have to kind of zoom in and see that a white dot turned into a red dot. You got a different hash value. So,
that's a really good point. I mean, we got digital photographs now, and they're so easily manipulated, and people just accept that the photograph that they see is what the actual image in real life was, but that's not necessarily the case, is it?
Very true. I had a case several years ago where what the individual did is took screenshots of their phone of text messaging that they said came in from a party threatening. Well, we got analyzing the picture. It wasn't screen captured on the phone. It was created on a computer.
Wow.
And, when you start asking the judge, hey, we think we want the computer because we want to look and see if Photoshop or something else is on there that may have manipulated this picture, pretty soon the computer no longer exists, right? They're going to tell you, oh, well, I got rid of that years ago. It's no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Jim, and this is more often than not, when I've had victims and family members and there's SLED or has seized the phone and they'll turn it on out there and it will send a message, to a family member, and they're like, and this person's dead, like the victim's dead. And like, I just got a message from their phone. How did that happen? And I mean, that does happen, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Your road officers are probably the worst of that, right? Because they pick it up and they look at it and they start scrolling. And they may look at it and go, well, wait a minute, here's a message. And as soon as they fat finger it and they hit the send, it's gone, right? It's sent.
Right.
Or because maybe the phone didn't have good signal. We've all had that before, right? Is that you're trying to send an attachment by text message and it says it's queued and it's sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. It may be 30 minutes later and all of a sudden the picture gets sent. Well, different. Law enforcement finds that phone on the floor. He picks it up. He's now reoriented the phone to where now that picture goes, oh, I have good signal, and it sends it.
Right.
And
this is a common layperson question, because you mentioned subpoenas and then layers of subpoenas and stuff. So obviously we're all talking about situations where, somebody's accused of a crime, they're indicted. And so we can issue subpoenas, for this stuff. But sometimes in the context of restraining orders, for example, somebody comes to you and says, I just think I know, my ex-husband was calling me at 5 a.m. and I know it's him. And, but there's no basis is there any way to get that information short of getting the device to see the outgoing call, for example? So you can't subpoena it.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because, your lay person, the person at home that's getting harassed or whatever, doesn't have subpoena power. And they don't necessarily go down, and hire an attorney because they've got just, an ex-spouse or whatever the situation is. So what do you do in those situations? What I've done before, I've recommended, is that you send a letter of preservation. Sometimes that doesn't get you very far, but the most important thing is to protect your phone. Because if your phone, we can also look at those phone calls and see if it was a spoof, if it was something else that came through by another source. Because I've designed applications before that I can show you how to spoof a phone number. I can put in your phone number and send it to just a number of different people. And unless you preserve your phone on the recipient end, we may not have anything, because that individual may hear that there's an investigation about to launch. And what do? They get rid of the phone.
Jim, can you tell if it's a spoof number from your phone, like an expert like you?
Yeah, sometimes I can, because what they'll do is, especially, I don't use the text message standard apps. I use the ones that actually give me a little bit more meat behind it. So when you send it, I can look in there and I can say, this came from an iPhone. And it'll have what we call like a GUID number, which is a alphanumeric serial number, digital serial number to it. And I can take that information. A lot of times I can dissect it a little bit, and I can say, oh, this came from Outlook, or this came from a browser, or that this came from, some other element, and not necessarily a cell phone.
I see.
And what's a spoof? A spoof, how do you define that?
So a spoof number would be that I pretend to be you and send out text messages or make phone calls, and on their phone screen, it looks like you're making the phone call.
Sarah, I can't believe you don't know what a spoof phone is. That's Matt knows. I guarantee you, Matt knows.
Oh yeah, I'm getting texts daily from the Arabian prince who needs me to send him $3 million.
I think you have criminal minds. You have criminal minds.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt misspelled an undercase. Like,
it's so easy. I mean, they're like free applications. You can go online and you can spoof a number and then use it on your phone. And I can call you using any number I want to choose. I mean, it's so easy.
But Jim P is saying that essentially someone's cloning your number.
Yeah.
Easy. And here's the rub to that: the spoof services charge you a fraction of a penny to send that text message. So if you think, the individual spending $15-$20 every time they want to spoof your phone number, no, it's pennies.
Well, how does this company still exist?
Take my number. Hold on, Matt. This is crazy to me. Someone can take my number and essentially clone it, right, on their computer or whatever, and then start harassing Matt.
Yes.
And Matt's going to think it's me. What?
Yeah, and it looks like you're the one sending it.
Except it won't show up as an iPhone message, right? It'll show up as like some other different way.
Well, it depends on what services you're using. You ask the question, well, what's the legal, basis for allowing this service to exist? think of the time you go to your dentist and all of a sudden you get this automated text message that says, in 3 days, your appointment is up. Hit, enter one.
Confirm, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's the legitimate service behind that. And like all things out there, it turns negative.
I got a great idea. Matt, you go to one of these spoofing services, put Sarah's number in, and then text her a picture of you in your best bathing suit attire. How about that?
No, he'll send it to you.
Yeah.
I'll send it to both of you. All right. I'll share the love.
All right. No, it's so easy to do, Sarah. It's so easy to do. I was at a seminar once, and the guy demonstrated it. It was astonishing. But anyway, so we sort of got off track. But Jim, one of the things that we've been talking about here is cell phone data, cast, and how to locate, your client. Is he at the crime scene, not at the crime scene? And there are other sources of location data, aren't there, like OnStar on a vehicle and other things? Can you sort of walk through that for us?
Yes, we call that the black box, right? Is that our vehicles are more intelligent than most computers today. They contain a wealth of information about your speed, they're even now starting to put in your location. They're putting in, how fast the engine is turning and how fast it took for you to hit the brake and how much, you're speeding up, or are you in reverse, or you've got a turn signal on, all of this. And they classify a lot of it as diagnostic information, just in case something goes wrong with your car. The mechanic can hook up a connector to it, get all that information out and see what's going on. But now investigators have seen that this is a huge resource. Beyond the tag readers that they have, they can do that big dump of that black box and get all that information. And most of the time it's in plain language. It's going to tell you brake was stopped, or the brakes were pumped, or that the steering wheel was abruptly turned to the left or the right, went into park, the engine was in idle, and what the idle speed was.
And it'll give you a location, GPS data.
Well, yeah, but hold on. That just means the car was there. It doesn't mean the person was in the car. You still need more, right?
That's the same argument you have with a phone. Just because you have data that says where a phone is.
You could have had your phone.
Absolutely.
Right. But that's what obviously we always deal with circumstantial evidence. So that's just one piece of the puzzle. But then, when you go into a store and you've been there before and your phone automatically connects to their Wi-Fi, that issue actually came up in the Gilgo Beach case, the Rex Heuermann case, the guy from Long Island who, is charged with serial killing of sex workers. They found his burner phones were connecting, the burner phones that were calling the family members and taunting them after the murders of these women were connecting to the Wi-Fi at his office in Manhattan, where he's an architect. So that's one of the pieces of evidence that they're using in that case. So besides the car, the location services on the phone, and what Jim is saying on the car, the OnStar, the location services on the phone, and the Wi-Fi connectivity to an IP address. Is there any other locations?
We talked about, these Snapchat and all these other services.
Right.
Yeah, there's really kind of three buckets. Whenever I get involved with a case, I start with the cellular data is really the last of it, because it's not as pinpoint accurate as getting GPS data, right? So the tower, I may be 3 to 7 miles in this diameter in this area. That's a big area if you're downtown like Atlanta or you're in LA. That's a big area to cover. But if I can get GPS, I'm going to zero in to maybe 50, 60 feet. Now I can start building what we call geofencing, and I can be within 3 feet depending on just how good my data is. Where do we get the geofencing? A lot of times we'll get it from Google or, one of those big houses that's just taking all your data, and your phone it's talking to a router or a switch or a modem at a house. And now I can pin down sometimes to the room you're in within the house by getting that geofencing data put together.
It can be that specific?
Oh, yeah. I want you to think about, let's say you walk into Walmart and all of a sudden you get a text message about a blue light special in Walmart.
They know you just walked in.
Exactly. It's the
Right.
same kind of
Unbelievable.
How are we not
Yeah.
living in a world without crime at this point? Like,
It
Right.
is.
like what? You're such an idiot. Like, we got everything, buddy. You're done. You're
It
done.
is. It is Big Brother. It is Big
Well,
Brother.
and you know, you think about it, Kohberger, one of the first things that people were saying is that he's a criminology PhD. Like, how could he not commit the perfect crime? Like, how could he not know not to use his own phone? But again, it takes you back to the Rex Heuermann guy who was using burner phones. And even that was, you know, he used them to call, and then, you know, they traced it to his IP. It's absolutely incredible to me. You know, one of the things I recently found out, as Jim was talking about the apps, I found out that Twitter, I think before it became X, was also recording your location. And I shut that down. When I found out, I asked my friend Rosalie, who works for Chris Cuomo, because she knows all this stuff. I said, shut this down. Like, the last place I want people to know where I'm at is on Twitter. Like,
it's pretty intrusive. I mean,
wow.
it knows no mercies, right? It doesn't care that you're inside of a church. It doesn't care if you're in the bathroom. I mean, it's picking it up.
Right.
And it's telling somebody, and somebody is storing it, and somebody is selling that.
Exactly. Yeah. Jim,
So,
I have a tech question about GPS on the phone, and simply this: is the phone getting the GPS readings directly from a satellite? Because when I go offshore in my boat, you know, I get outside of cell phone range, and my GPS on my phone's not working. My satellite on my boat's working, but so is there some interplay between towers and GPS data, or is it just getting it straight from the sky?
It's usually getting it straight from the sky. I mean,
Interesting.
satellites are a million miles away, and yet it's got that accuracy. And
you know, every time we record a podcast,
yeah,
Jimmy G comes up with, Jimmy G has a list of things that he's wanted to know for like months and months.
I'm just wondering why I'm paying all this money for this navigation on this boat when I can just take my phone out there. So yeah.
Exactly right. Well, you learned something. So I wanna close off with a very interesting case that you're an expert in, Jim P. You're an expert in the 2004 Kirby Smith murder case involving, I believe, 2 defendants that went to trial. I'm sorry, where was that case?
It was in Columbus, Georgia.
Okay, Georgia. There are a lot of holes in that case based on, you know, what I've read, including missing service call and maintenance records related to the cell towers. And you testified in that case as an expert. Explain to us what the prosecution's cell data evidence consisted of, what it was, why it was unreliable, and what was the defense to the cell data, essentially. And I guess it led to the defendant getting a new trial, right?
Well, the judge said enough is enough and just tossed it all together. And it all came down to, we had these records, but we couldn't say that he was talking, or that there was talk going to a specific tower at a specific time, because that tower was at full operations. There was nobody could say that it just took it because the individual was at another location and should have been talking to a different tower, but ended up at this tower. We couldn't find out why. And that's because we didn't have those maintenance and service records.
And is that just a piece of what led to essentially the conviction being set aside, or?
Yeah, it was another part of that was, and this was, the case went cold, and then the cold case got involved, and they started looking at the data from the computer, and they said that Mr. Kirby must have been killed at a certain time period because he was chatting with an individual and the chatting time had stopped, and they opined that because it stopped, he must have been killed at that particular moment. And that wasn't the facts. We looked outside of the chatting, and I found web browser history that supported that he wasn't chatting, but he was very active on websites. So the time of death wasn't even accurate.
Wow. Unbelievable. You are wonderful. I think that the way that you've broken this down for us, it's so understandable and valuable to our listeners and our viewers. And I'm going to be bold enough to invite you back on with Jimmy G to talk to us about issues that are going to come up in some of these high profile cases that are within your expertise. So I hope that you join us again, Jim.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
All right. Thanks so much, Jim.
And just before we log off, I want to just tell everybody, if you've never listened to an episode of our show before, welcome. Please subscribe. We're on all the podcast platforms. We're also on YouTube at The Presumption, all the social media handles as well. So we love all of our fans and hope to gain a few new followers as well. And until next time, Sarah and Jim,
we rest.